Hi everyone, today's video is going to be a mid to late game guide for supports. I believe that this is an important topic to cover because there are generally a lot of misconceptions and just overcomplicating the topic, so I wanted to lay down some foundations for you to approach your mid to late game. What I'm going to be talking about is mid to late game macro and mid to late game micro in terms of fighting. Without further ado, let's jump into this video. So I quickly want to define mid to late game. This is the time of the game where a mid or a bot tower is down for either team. And this often shortly happens after 14 minutes as towers are squishier with no plates. So, for the mid to late game, there is a very simple formula for mid to late macro. Mid first, vision, and pressure. I'm going to cover each of these points concisely. Let's start with mid first. What is mid first? Mid first means to play around mid first, before pressuring other areas of the map. Playing around means shoving mid wave if possible. And then if a mid tower is down, you place the deepest mid ward possible. If you're not able to shove mid, then you place a shallow mid ward. So in either situation, you are placing a ward in the mid lane before anything else. If mid towers are up, then mid ward is not as valuable, as the lane is too short. The minions practically provide all relevant information with their own vision. But as the game progresses, one of the mid towers is going to be down, and then you want to do this mid ward first. But in either situation, shove mid if you can first. So, why mid first? Waves meet first and mid, so you can translate pressure from mid to a side. The middle lane is shorter than the side lanes, and so that's why the minions meet before the side minions. And then you get pressure on that mid wave, you can move to aside when the waves haven't even met there yet, and you can translate pressure like that and practically win two lanes at once, therefore controlling a side of the map. So if you're pressuring a side of the map as opposed to the middle of the map, the other side instantly becomes weak. The enemy can control it with no possible answer from yourself. So that's why it's important for mid to come first, because you can react to either side of the map. So why the mid ward? The mid ward is so important because you can see the enemy's plan for the following mid wave. You can see the side that they are controlling for. If no one shows on your mid ward, then that means that you can get the mid wave of prio, and then you can force them to catch the wave, you can pressure a side of the map. If they don't catch that mid wave, then they're just bleeding golden EXP, and that's a win-win for you. So if they are showing on the ward, then you can make a judgment call if you can contest, and obviously if you can, then you want to. Otherwise, you can graciously concede the mid control and instead pressure aside. So from my coaching experience, in most elos below Master or even Grandmaster, if you actively think about mid first, you can get mid prio in situations where you shouldn't be able to. So let's talk about exceptions quickly. The asterisk here is if something pressing is happening. I'm not asking for you to stroll past the skirmish on your way to shove mid wave or get a mid ward. If something pressing is happening, such as a nearby fight, or someone being out of position somewhere, for example, an enemy solo laner is pushing up too far in a side lane, then of course you deal with that. However, in most situations, I would like to say something pressing isn't happening and you want to do mid first. Alright, let's talk about vision now. And what we're going to start off is by talking about the 1 mid 2 quadrant rule. I've already talked about this concept in Support Specifics Vision, which I'm going to link in the description below, but I'm going to reiterate it today. 1 mid 2 quadrant rule means 1 mid ward and 2 wards in a quadrant. So ideally the mid ward first and then 2 wards in a quadrant. And for those who are not quite familiar with what a quadrant is, these are the 4 quadrants of Summoner's Rift, where there's a buff in each quadrant, and you can control one of them after you play for mid. So 1 ward mid and then 2 wards in a quadrant. If you try 1 ward on each side of the map, maybe something like 1 here, 1 here, 1 here or something, you can't control both sides of the map. Attempting to ward the side of the map that you can't control is not only dangerous for you and you might die, but it also should get readily cleared. So now let's talk about what the 2 quadrant wards should look like. Each ward needs to provide relevant and unique information. So this means entrances to quadrants. Let's say we are blue side like we want to ward the enemy's top side quadrant. This is an entrance into the quadrant. this is an entrance into the quadrant. So you want to get some vision around this entrance. You want to get some vision around this entrance. If you want to know more specific locations for wards, I once again recommend you to check out my support specific vision video. However, let's have a look at if the shoe is on the other foot. Let's say we're red side now, and so we can't get mid prior, we get a shallow mid ward, and now we want to ward both entrances around top side here. So this is an entrance for the enemy blue team to walk in. This is an entrance for the enemy blue team to walk in. So we're going to ward the entrances once again. We're going to ward the entrance here, and we're going to get potentially some kind of ward around here. So we can see them here, we can see them here. And this is going to apply for every quadrant in the game. Let's just jump to us being blue side again and warding entrances to this quadrant. Here's an entrance, chuck a ward somewhere around here. Here's an entrance, chuck a ward somewhere around here. Exact same thing for both blue and for red. You can see if we're looking at red team's perspective, this would be an entrance and this would be an entrance by the blue team. It's just every quadrant has two entrances for either team, and what you want to do is get your mid ward and then ward those two entrances. For the sake of being thorough, I will show you each quadrant. So let's say we are a blue team, we're on the defensive, we get our shallow mid ward, and then we want to defensively ward up our blue side quadrant, right? Here's an entrance, get a ward somewhere around here. Here's an entrance, get a ward somewhere around here. And exactly where is just going to depend on a lot of different factors, but as long as you do get a ward in for either entrance, you're good. Okay, so shoe on the other foot, we're a red team, and now we want to kind of set up for Baron, and we want to ward up the entrances once again. Entrance around here, get a ward somewhere around here, entrance somewhere around here. Okay, last quadrant. We are blue team, we're defensively warding this quadrant, get a ward somewhere around this entrance, and somewhere around here. And then for red team, let's just get all the wards out. So for red team, there's an entrance over here, and there's an entrance over here. Cool. So you may have heard me talk about deep and mid shallow wards briefly. When you are ahead, you want to get a deep mid ward. So let's say we're blue side and we're going to get a deep mid ward as deep as safely possible, and then we're going to move to control an enemy quadrant, whichever we deem appropriate. If we are behind, so let's say we are red team, then we are going to get a shallow mid ward, maybe even like this. And we cannot contest midway safely, and then we're going to move to a quadrant to place defensive vision on that quadrant. Or if we decide that we are going to sack a quadrant, we can't control it and we'd rather trade, we won't contest mid, but we will aggressively ward another quadrant while the enemy controls mid and the opposite side. Now, I understand that solo queue can be really chaotic. There can be a lot of things going on. Maybe there's constant fighting. Maybe someone's constantly over-exerting on the side and you don't have the time to do mid first. That's perfectly fine. We have to adapt to whatever is happening in the game. However, if the game is slow and controlled, then you need to be comfortable with that pace. You need to have the fundamentals in order, and so that will look like mid first, one mid, two quadrant wards. Okay, so let's quickly talk about pinks. Where do pinks go? They go on the edge of your control, so that it safely denies as deep as possible information. There is no point putting a pink really defensively on your side of the map. It's not going to deny any relevant information. There's no putting a pink really deep in the enemy's side because they're just going to readily clear it out. So you want your pink to stay up and deny relevant information. So if you're winning, that's generally going to look like either the river or shallow enemy jungle. Okay, we're blue side, we're winning. Maybe we're going to control for Baron, and so we're going to control river. They can't clear out our pink wards in river here. Maybe we could even put a pink in the Baron pit here, and then we're going to play mid first, blah blah blah. We could even, it depends how hard you're winning, but if you're quite far ahead and you can hold a pink in the enemy shallow jungle, then that's what you want to do. And this is just a concept for you to think about. As deep as you can control is where your pinks go. Let's put the shoe on the other foot once again. We're red team, we're losing. So we're going to put pinks as deep as we can control, which is just our shallow jungle. So the enemy's going to be hard pressed to try and clear pinks around these kind of locations. If we try to put it here, or if we ever try to put it in the river, it will probably get cleared. Now I'm briefly going to talk about the specific locations for pinks, as there is so much importance in mid first, you want to have pinks near the middle of the map, near mid lane. So whichever side that you want to control, I recommend warding the mid bush on that side. So we get mid prio, we put a pink here, and then we can control the side of the map. Maybe someone else puts a pink around here. And that's just so that we can always have fog around the middle of the map so that we can comfortably look for picks or move without vision. And obviously you could do the exact same if you want to control bot side river here. So these are the locations if you can control around mid, and then obviously if you're behind, you're going to be placing defensive pinks around your shallow jungle bush locations. Okay, we've talked about mid first and we've talked about vision. Now for the last macro point, pressure. Where do you pressure? After you do mid first, you want to play to the side of the map that your jungler will pressure. You can't safely control the side of the map without your jungler's presence. I say where the jungler will pressure, not where he is. If he's clearing his camps, he's not pressuring. If he exits the jungle and enters the river, now he's pressuring that side of the map. So, what if my jungler is on the wrong side? Where he should pressure and where he is pressuring is always going to be a different story, potentially. Just understand that it is much better to pressure with your jungler on the wrong side of the map than pressure without your jungler on the correct side of the map. You can't, and you die. This is going to be a perfect example of ace mentality. Check out the ace mentality video if you're unfamiliar. The link is going to be down below in the description. But to quickly summarize, ACE stands for acknowledging the best play, communicating the best play, and then embracing reality. You want to know the best place to pressure. A. You want to communicate that to your team through pings, through body language. C. And then you embrace reality. E. To control to your jungler's side wherever he is. Now, how do we know which is the right side to pressure? How do we know what the best play is? The best place to pressure is towards whichever objective is next. I'm going to do a quick priority list here just to help you decide what's next. Just a brief guide. Outers, then neutrals, then inners, then inhibs. I put outers above neutrals because it's very hard to consistently control for neutrals if the enemy still has their outer towers. And on the flip side, outer towers are very easy to destroy. Neutrals are fair game once you have all of the enemy outers and you can safely contest the enemy quadrant, which is nearby that neutral objective. The next point is that you want your carries, typically your mid or your ADC, at the objective and your top laner on the weak side of the map, on the other side. Here in this example, you can see that my top laner is on the weak side of the map and I am entering the bot side, and what I want to play for next are inners, right? But I'm not going to be playing for top inner because that's where all their numbers are, and our strong side is bot side, where my Vigar is. So I'm controlling for mid towards bot. I'm going to be playing for mid and bot inner towers. So let's take a step back and just quickly summarize this point. If you want to take your mid to late game pressure to the next level and actively carry games here, which is definitely possible, then what you need to do is identify what the next objective should be and who should be in that lane. And then you communicate these to your team via pings, and then you embrace reality and pressure to wherever your jungler actually is. This might also encompass backpinging your carry on the weak side of the map if lane assignments are suboptimal. Let's say you want to play for Baron and your ADC is randomly solo shoving bot out. You need to ping him to group up. So yeah, if you just want to not feel lost and do your part for the team in mid to late, then all you need to keep in mind is just pressure towards where your jungler is. Okay, so it wouldn't be a Coach Cupcake video without diving into the details as deeply as possible. I'm going to slap an expert mode disclaimer on this next point, and I recommend if you're plat or below to just completely skip this part. How far you stray away from mid after doing mid first is dependent on your champion class. The reason that it differs for different classes is that different classes have different levels of mobility. The more mobile your champ is, the more you can cover, the more area you can cover after mid first, between mid waves. And the weaker your champion would be in an ARAM, as your items or abilities are giving you mobility, so you are less useful in mid ARAMs. I'm going to do a quick tier list of classes for how often you want to leave mid. So, for the classes that should almost never leave mid are the mages, like Zyras, Brands, Vel'Kozes. For the classes that should rarely leave mid are enchanters, such as Janna, Karma, Lulu, etc. For the class that sometimes want to leave mid are engagers, like Nautilus, Alistair, Leona, etc. And for the class that often wants to leave mid are playmakers, Pike and Bard. So this tier list should just give you a sense of how reluctant you should be to leave mid. Before we move on from mid to late macro, I want to leave you with this concise summary. Mid first, 1 mid 2 quadrant rule, and pressure towards your jungler. Okay, let's talk about mid to late game micro now, and this is going to come in the form of skirmishes and team fights. So you want to have macro as a foundation. If nothing happens in the game, then you know what to do. You have the advantage over your enemies. However, inevitably there are going to be fights. Solo queue is a chaotic environment, and so you want to know your role and perform as well as you can in team fights as well. Now this is going to be much harder to generalize for all supports. So what I'm going to do is split it up for the different support classes and get a feel for how you should approach fights. So for the mages and enchanters, you want to embrace any and all ARAM fights. You need to play front to back. This means having an ally between yourself and enemies. You want to position selfishly so that you can stay alive. Then you can have a high uptime in fights. Enchanters, they're going to have huge amount of utility, healing, shielding that they can provide. Mages, they're going to have a lot of DPS, potentially from Liandry's especially. You're very susceptible to getting caught and dying, so you need to ensure that you take this front to back style seriously. And as you can see, if you do make sure that you have enemies, allies between yourself and the enemies, the amount that you can do within a fight is ridiculous. So you want to avoid chaotic skirmishes in jungles or short numbers where you can't organize yourself in the front to back. These are not what mages and enchanters want. You want to group up with your team and then just output as much utility as possible or damage for mages. For engagers, you want to look for picks and skirmishes around mid and to control vision of a side. Generally, avoid handshaking a 5v5 front to back. This is not playing into your strengths. You want to engage when enemies try to face check your control, or to just find picks on mid waves. You want to position creatively to gain access to the enemy backline in a team fight, so that you can actually kill their carries. You don't have as much front to back or utility power as the mages and the enchanters, and you'll just get outperformed. So you also want to look for multi-man engages. You only get one shot in a fight, so you really want to make sure that you're patient and you choose the right moment to use your spells. For playmakers, you want the game to be played at your own pace. You want to impact sides, drag enemies away from mid, constantly look for picks, and to provide number advantages by moving to the sides of the map. Inject volatility and chaos into the game. Anything to avoid a front-to-back 5v5, where you can't use your mobility. You have very low impact in the front to back, you don't have much utility, you really need to ensure chaos, roaming, and numbers advantages. So these are just general summaries for how you want to approach team fights for each champion class. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Team fighting is very hard and has a lot of variables to take into account. You're just going to have to get into a lot of fights and feel it out for yourself. Make sure that you're thinking about the right things when you are team fighting or reviewing your team fights. You need to learn which fights your champ functions well in. You know, do they like these front to backs? Do they like skirmishes? Do they like roaming around and finding number advantages? Get a feel for when they feel good. You also want to learn which key cooldowns to keep an eye out for from enemy champs. So when you are in a fight and maybe you're waiting for Malzahar to use his ults or for Jax to use his Q and E fours before you can fight, get a feel for what each champ, what their big ability in a fight is, as there often is one. You also want to review your fights and leave the fights with an idea of what could have been done better, instead of just saying, damn, this was such a chaotic coin flip of a fight. Who cares? It's unrealistic to happen, and you just move on to the next thing. Get into the details. Figure out what you should have done, and keep yourself honest. And above all, do not shy away from fights. Embrace the chaos. Micro is as big a part of League as macro, so work on both aspects of your gameplay. I know that a lot of my content is very structured, methodical, and focusing on fundamentals and sureties. But solo queue is chaotic. Fights have so many variables to consider in a short amount of time, so embrace them. Back yourself that you can not only win a slow-paced game with better fundamentals, but you can also thrive in the chaos and the fast-paced action of skirmishes and team fights. Thanks everyone for watching. I wanted this video to be simple yet detailed at the same time, which I'm finding a bit difficult to juggle. So please let me know if you want more in-depth content or if you want more succinct content. I genuinely want to provide you with whatever works best for you. So if you enjoyed, please feel free to join my School of Support Discord server. Link is going to be down below, and consider liking and subscribing. Bye.